Good evening. This is Brett Provenzano, Superintendent of the Fairfield Central School District. Welcome to our school reopening town meeting with our PTA representatives. I have to my right, please introduce yourself, Dr. Cook. Say it again.
Sorry. Dr. Steve Cook. I'm a pediatrician at Gotham Children's Hospital.
To my left.
Tim Sliz, Vice President of the School Board.
Kelly Hodge, 612 PTA rep.
Sarah Driscoll, K-5 parent rep.
And to my right, we have a host of Fairport Central School District administrators, principals, who are very interested to be a part of this conversation, to listen and learn, and to be prepared to support our children as we eventually return back to school. We are having technical difficulties with Facebook. It is not letting us in. Again, I think that's par for our course, and I really appreciate the efforts and patience of our community as we continue to navigate social media platforms. We are on our YouTube station, and I am seeing that our numbers are starting to increase, and we'll hopefully be able to get people over. This link is on our Facebook page, so all people have to do is press the play button, and it will stream over to our YouTube Live. This YouTube Live will be recorded, and we will again place this on our social media so people can see it, continue to revisit as we continue to listen and learn from each other. I want to say right off the bat, I would be remiss. I do have some. I have Joyce Kostick. Joyce Kostick wants to say hello and share a little bit. She is on our oversight task force as well.
Hello, I am glad to be with everyone. Eager to hear what we're going to hear tonight.
Thank you. And we have echoes. I do not want to overwhelm the sound waves with echoes. So, we're good to go? Okay. You'll see that we have a homepage banner, and it's a yellow banner. If there are specific questions that you have throughout this dialogue or town meeting, if there's information that you feel that we need to develop more, by all means, please share this using this link, and this will be part of our Q&A moving forward, and do our best to answer all questions. I must also say that if there's questions that you're emailing me and I'm not getting back to you, the emails have been fairly constant and steady, and we'll be using this page to address some common questions that we continually receive as we talk about our eventual transition. And again, it's definitely very important. We understand that there's lots of good questions and lots of energy around this conversation. As I have always said, there's 5 fundamentals to our return back to school. We will use guidance and recommended best practices. This is not something that we're taking a poll on, a straw vote. We are using the guidance from the Center for Disease Control, our experts from the Department of Health, Monroe County Department of Health, and we're constantly going back to those recommended best practices, and that's been a consistent theme throughout our entire process that we've said and we will continue to develop as we move forward. We're seeking feedback and communicating with the community. I'll be sharing with you a little bit about how we've done that over the past several months, but we know that there's multiple scenarios, and within those scenarios we understand that the social emotional needs of our students and staff is prominent. The academic needs and curriculum management and ed programming needs to be fluently addressed as we return back to school. And there's many pieces to this puzzle, and it's an ever-changing puzzle, and it needs to be implemented with high degrees of fidelity as we operationalize our plan. It needs to be done consistently throughout our organization. What happens in one school relative to operations and logistics, curriculum, management, and social emotional needs of our students needs to be applied across the board. And like any good plan, you monitor and adjust, and you need to be flexible and responsive to the changing landscape, and COVID-19 is definitely a ever-changing landscape. Here are some ways that we've communicated and received feedback. Most recently, we had family input through a Google Doc survey. Lots of good information, received information on the perceptions and thoughts of our community. This survey and the results will be posted after we do our community meetings today and tomorrow. Please look out for those survey results. If we're able to address them tonight, I'll definitely share that information. It is part of this presentation, again, which will be online and accessible. May 1st, we asked the community, what are the most important things you would like the district to consider as we transition back to school? And we received lots of good information from that thought exchange. And as we entered into our closure in March, we were asking how can we best support each other. There's been multiple town hall meetings, and again, I'm not going to list them all off. We have been committed to communicate, get information disseminated to our stakeholders, and learn from our stakeholders as we move through this process. And you see the range of dates in front of you. Here's our timeline that I shared 2 weeks ago. We are in the first, where it says the week of July 13th, that came and went. The governor and state education department released the guidance. And again, that's part of our plan. That's part of the fundamentals, is the state education department's guidance, the governor's guidance, coupled with our experts from the county and state departments of health. Right now, administrative work groups are developing plans based upon the guidance. And if you click on this link, it's 145 pages of this guidance. And we have 11 days there, 12 days there to distill this information down and create a cogent plan that meets the needs of our students and the guidance that we have received. The Board of Education had a special workshop. They may choose to do another one in the very near future, meaning like next week as we finalize the plan as well. There's been town meetings scheduled for our community. I know that our staff is very interested to meet and discuss and learn more. We have staff members in the wings as we go through this process, and we complete it by July 31st. We will then be entering into a phase where we will be working with our staff to refine and confirm the details of our plan. There's many details to this plan that remain unanswered, but we will be working with our staff work groups in the very near future to iron out some of the questions about what a hybrid looks like, what an online looks like, what is grading, finalizing those details as we move forward, what school days looks like, what PPE looks like, and so on and so forth. The governor will reassess the circumstances and provide a final status report on how we are going to proceed. If the transmission rate is less than 5, schools will reopen. He will be using a 14-day average. And I think maybe Dr. Cook can talk a little bit about that when he takes the floor. If the transmission rate is 9% or greater over a 5-day average. Oh, geez. Yeah, 5. Gotcha. I'm with it. Using a 7-day average, excuse me. Thank you. We will have to transition to a remote environment, but hopefully our transmission rate continues to, be well below 5, and we can plan for our eventual return. Again, here's information. It's on our website. It's attached to this presentation. You're more than welcome to see the 145 pages that we're processing. There's an 18-page application, if you will, as we create our reentry plan back to school. Here's a recent letter from Department of Public Health of Monroe County. And Dr. Mendoza, this came out yesterday. It speaks to face coverings. It speaks to distancing. It speaks to expectations around certain activities, the importance of transportation protocols that we must adhere to, temperature checks that are required daily that will definitely need help from home to achieve as we reach out and communicate our plan in the next few weeks. We'll be explicitly sharing how we hope to achieve all of these recommendations, along with daily screenings for our faculty and staff, sanitation expectations. If there is a COVID case, we will have a plan of attack to manage and support our environment. This just came out yesterday. In a nutshell, it nicely captures, what the expectations were as we plan for our eventual return. There is a think tank and oversight transition committee. We've had different people come in and out of this conversation, but at the end of the day, within the next week or two, we'll be presenting our final findings, if you will, to this group that's up here. You've seen many of their faces throughout the past several weeks or through the past town meetings as well. Tomorrow we are meeting with our student representatives to help continue to give us feedback. We will share with them where we are in the process and what we hope to achieve as they return to school, and they'll give us incredible feedback. Their eyes are very critical to this process. Recently, I shared 4 reopening plans. There's 4 options. A full in-person, real-time instruction model. This plan would require that we use all the spaces, mitigate any open space or redefine the use of our spaces, use the 6-foot distancing requirement, or given the 6 feet distancing requirement, and masking and the amount of density in our schools, we anticipate that this will not be a viable option. This is why we speak to the hybrid model, and this is just a for example. We still need to iron out details. People understandably thought that we're definitely doing it on Mondays and Tuesdays, or Tuesdays and Thursdays and Mondays and Wednesdays, but we definitely need to iron out details. We have to coordinate with our BOCES representatives, and we do many educational endeavors with our BOCES. So we will be squaring this information away within the next several weeks, between probably August 3rd and August 14th. We'll be communicating out with a level of urgency because we know there's daycare or child care pieces at stake. So that's a hybrid model. But the hybrid model, in essence, just decreases our density. It really just takes us to a half capacity, if you will. We feel that that's manageable and reasonable as we transition back to school. We know that there's going to be families who that meets expectations, and we know that families would love for us to be in number 1. We all would love to be in number 1, but again, based upon the guidance, based upon the information that we've been receiving, right? And that's documents like this. It's documents that come from the state education department. We are bound by these public health requirements and guidance and research that supports the best practices during a world pandemic on how to bring our students back. There's a virtual instruction per family choice. I want to be clear about this piece. This would be full-time online classes for those who are unable to return for medical reasons, or if they have a general discomfort. They're not ready to come back. Families may be in different circumstances. This will be credit-bearing, offered to any family or student who meets the parameters discussed above. This will be a partnership with BOCES, using BOCES platforms. Okay, I think that's important to recognize. It may start out a little slow. It may not be as robust as you would hope it to be, because again, we are partnering with Monroe County BOCES There may be teachers from other districts supporting the online environment. There'd be a high level of commitment from families as we transition back to school for those who choose this option right here. We anticipate this commitment to be a long-term commitment for families. When I say that, we will reassess in January. So if families want to come to a hybrid model or whichever model we are in at that time, we can reassess at that point. But initially, it would be through January. There may be more questions about this as we go through this presentation, but by all means, we know that there are people out here who would benefit. There are families who would definitely be able to put the time and effort into an online component. And finally, if we have to close like we did in March, this is option number 4. Right? This is virtual instruction. In the event of a closure, this plan will have students joining their classes daily using a revised online schedule that aligns with our current schedule. This will allow for a seamless transition if necessary. That means our transmission rate has spiked for one reason or another. In that essence, we would have to go to full-time virtual instruction. Attendance will be taken, assignments will be given and graded. And we'll be sharing that in more detail as we move through this process. Any thoughts on any one of these four options? I know that there's different perspectives out there from parents, or Dr. Cook or board members.
Brett, is it okay for me to jump in?
Please,
All
yep.
right. So your school PTA emailed yesterday asking for questions. And just from the elementary schools, I received over 100 questions. So I really appreciate you guys sending those in. I've compiled them because there were a lot of similarities. So I'm just gonna jump right in. Brett, once the governor has made his recommendations, how long will parents have to decide whether to do the hybrid or the virtual model?
I really appreciate that question, and
I saw that it said that his recommendations will come by August 21st.
Yeah, so we will need to get information from parents. And we're going to put an August 10th-ish deadline. I'll confirm that. I'll communicate that with the board and get their perspectives on it. But you'll be seeing very soon another survey that we're asking for very specific information. We will ask families if their children will walk to school, ride the school bus, or if they will drive their children to and from school. Again, expectations on the school bus is 6 feet and masking. Right? There's not a lot of wiggle room there. So please know that we'll be getting information out, a form, so we can start understanding what our bus situation will look like. And we're also going to be asking for in-person or distance learning. If you choose model number 3, we're going to be asking you to declare that probably about a week after the governor makes his final declaration.
Brett, can you clarify the main differences between hybrid, virtual, and parents choosing to homeschool and how that's different than choosing the district virtual option?
So the hybrid is kids are coming to school, and that's exciting. I think that we're all looking forward to bringing our students back to school, but they're doing it in a way that decreases the density of our schools. We're doing it in a way, a hybrid model that allows us to honor the 6 feet distancing expectations and the masking expectations. Hybrid allows us to bring our kids into school, our kids and students, our students and staff to connect and just begin the transition back. The virtual piece, again, if you are in a situation where there's medical reasons or if there's just a general discomfort, then there's high levels of commitment from the family to be able to support our children in an online environment. It may start out a little slow. It may start out like it did in March, simply because we are collaborating with Monroe County BOCES. It's going to take some time to organize. We even may have some staff who might be able to support this environment, but that is using our BOCES network. So there's the distinguishing features. Does that make sense?
Yes. And homeschool, if you choose to homeschool, you are unenrolling with Fairport, and you have to present curriculum that you will be using. Is that correct?
That is correct. If you are going to be choosing to homeschool, I didn't put information about homeschooling, but to contact my office directly, my email, bprovenzano at fairport.org to declare if you are choosing to do homeschool.
What about technology? I had a lot of questions. Are we able to go to one-to-one? Is it going to be? Are there going to be limited numbers for whole families, or will it be per student?
We're working really hard to purchase Chromebooks. So if we do need to go one-to-one, or if we are in a scenario where it's probably more sanitary to give students a computer so they're not sharing computers, we are positioning ourselves to do so. We have orders out, and we're working diligently to bring those in when they do come in to be able to disseminate to our students.
Will classrooms have cameras in them so students on the off days can watch what's going on to reaffirm those lessons that they learned before?
So we're working through that detail. There's a legal piece to that. There's privacy laws. Students, families just can't peer in on a classroom for those purposes to protect educational rights and educational records of students. So we're working with our legal teams, and I know that our staff is going to look for creative ways to engage students on that off day. We've heard flipped lessons. We've heard doing guided practice or check-ins, with clusters of children. But we are mandated to do attendance daily. So that's part of the work that needs to occur between August 3rd and the 21st. And I'm flipping back to that station, to this slide simply to reinforce this is when our educators will be coming on board to help confirm and solidify these plans. What we submit to the state on July 31st, lots of assurances, general framework, but then we need to continue to add meat to the plan.
Will child care before care and after still be offered at the schools through the YMCA?
We still plan on offering and partnering with the YMCA. I've been talking to the town to see how they could support child care, because we do realize that these scenarios present that challenge to families. The town have been incredible partners. Supervisor Hannah and his team are poised to be a partner and to try to understand how they could best support given their resources and the parameters they have to follow. Again, we're developing that scenario. The frustrating thing, I understand that parents, families need to plan, and we're going to work with great amounts of urgency to communicate, to develop and then communicate what's occurring on those fronts.
So a lot of questions came up around how you're going to be sanitizing the buildings and then concerns about the chemicals. I know you had mentioned that a little bit last night. Can you talk about how you plan to sanitize, what type of chemical will be used? And then with that, can you talk a little bit about the air circulation and filtration systems in the buildings?
So I know somebody who can and do it very well. We have Aaron Smith, our Director of Buildings and Grounds. But before he takes the floor, part of our responsibility of this 145-page document is to address those questions. So we will be addressing those questions in our reentry plan. This reentry plan will be made public so you could see what we submitted. And we also have our resident expert here, Mr. Aaron Smith, who's the Director of Buildings and Grounds. Smith, thank you.
Can we try? Okay. We're gonna give this a try. Hopefully they'll troubleshoot the echo as we're talking. There were a lot of questions in one question, which I'm gonna try to take.
So the air filtration.
Air filtration. So, I mentioned this last night in last night's meeting. The fortunate part for the Fairport School District is that for years they've worked on keeping their infrastructure as up to date as they can. Now, it's not to say we don't have old buildings, because we do. It's not to say that some of the equipment is old, but we have adapted, modified that heating and cooling equipment. Most of our heating and cooling air filtration system is already at the MERV 13 standard, which most people know. That's what they're talking about in shopping malls. That's what was mandated just a few weeks ago. And a huge sigh relief I was at when most of our equipment was already there. There are some equipment that we are in the process right now of putting MERV 13 filters in. Now somebody says, how can you do that? It's not designed for that. You're right. It's not designed for that. It is going to be a hindrance on our energy efficiency. But if it means we can, if we take a 25% increase in our energy consumption at the cost of getting kids back in school, then that's what we need to do. And now, that being said, as you know, something else that came up last night, we're talking about capital project, modern equipment as we phase in capital projects and construction projects will be to the new standard of MERV 13 air filtration. Any other questions on?
I have a lot of questions. I've received a lot of questions regarding what type of chemicals you're going to be using to sanitize and how often that's going to be done.
So, right now, CDC standards for disinfecting and sanitizing are daily. So that's a non-negotiable. It will be done after hours when students are not here, so the risk of chemical exposure is slim to none. Without getting into too much detail about chemical names and branding and trade names and things like that, and this has been for years, our chemical inventory is Green Seal certified. It's been mandated for schools for 12 years or so now, something like that. So, and anybody who is truly interested, I'm willing to provide it. I can show we can provide safety data sheets, the EPA stands, the Green Seal certified certifications, the whole nine. But I take chemical exposure to kids seriously. It's not something I'm not even willing to do. Brett might yell at me if he said, "Gosh, give me some chemicals." No, Brett, you're not doing it. It's not good practice, and that's not what we're going to be doing every day. Is disinfecting. Anything else?
Once parents pick hybrid or virtual, are they able to change their minds? Like, what's going to be the cutoff? Is it by semester? Is it December? If it's not working for them at home and they're second guessing, should I have done this other option? Will they be able to switch?
If you look at my plan that I've been sharing since probably April, monitor and adjust. And I think part of any good plan, you have to monitor and adjust. You also have to give time for things to develop and get organized. And, initially I said, if you are choosing the option where we are doing the online, and you're choosing that for medical reasons or family reasons, for comfort, etc., we are asking that it will be a January commitment, and we will revisit it in November to see how families are going. But then if it's not working, we would then give you the opportunity to shift gears. Any one of these plans, by the way, we have to be ready to shift gears to. I would love to be at one at some point, right? I would love to be able to say to our community, this is the new guidance. Maybe there's been more studies or research that has come forward. We have to be ready to pivot to any one of these. But as we start the school year, as we develop plans for transportation, as we look at distancing in our schools, as we talk about 6 feet in masks, it's important that we have those accurate numbers so we can plan accordingly. I hope that answered your question, Sarah.
If you have multiple children in the district, is the priority to get them on the same days? And how will you handle requests coming in for childcare, people using friends that want their kids on the same days in a district this large?
And I think you said it, that last sentence, in a district this large, how do we accommodate all the needs and requests? And I keep going back to our timeline. I don't have that answer today on the 21st here, right? Hopefully, though, as we move through this process between August 3rd and August 21st, we'll be able to solidify those very important details. And once we solidify them, we do know that there's urgency there. Once we solidify them, we will communicate with that level of urgency. But like I said, it's going to be important for us to get the information from families on their choices. The more information we have, the sooner we have that information, the sooner we can develop a plan with the information, the better we'll be able to run it through models and then operationalize it.
Will the elementary kids still be receiving specials, and will lunch be in the cafeteria or in the classroom?
The elementary children will be receiving specials. Where they receive it might be different. For example, in a classroom. We'll be using all of our spaces differently. Cafeteria as well. From music rooms to art rooms, those are bigger classrooms. PE stations. We will be bringing those specials to our children. We're still, again, working out those details, and I'm going to be redundant because it's worth revisiting. The timeline that I'm sharing, when we're going to be developing and having specific answers to those questions, will be between August 3rd and August 21st. I do need to share some information relative to these plans. In the documents that we receive from the state ed department and from even our guidance from our medical experts, those students who are most vulnerable, those students who are in restrictive educational environments, our special classes, our adept classes, we will be bringing those students in to school. And I think it's important that families know that, the predictability, those classes are generally low, so we will be sharing that information, with clarity as we move through this process. So, please know that piece. Those students who are in alternative ed programs, those students who, are deemed at risk, we'll be communicating more specifically who those are as we move forward. But, those students who are in our adept classes or our special classes, self-contained rooms, will be coming to school daily.
Brett, I had a quick question. Just to go back to the virtual option, the question was, so the kids would still be enrolled in their schools, their assigned schools, but the curriculum would be coming through BOCES?
So we would enroll them in the virtual program. They would be working through the BOCES platform, and that's where they would remain. They would not be flopping in between rosters. They would not be on a Fairport teacher's roster that has a classroom in the hybrid scenario. So they would be committed to that teacher or that cohort that they are working with through the BOCES platform.
But they would still be a Fairport student?
They would still be a Fairport student.
Okay.
If we would move to a full-time virtual instructional mode, they would still remain in their cohort. They wouldn't be going to another teacher in Fairport. They would stay with their cohort. They would just resume on or carry on with what they've been doing.
To piggyback on that, Brett, will kids be clumped together with other Fairport kids, or is this something that other districts are doing and BOCES will be managing as well? So they could be with kids from a neighboring district or have a teacher that's not from Fairport.
Possibly. possibly, but also they could have a Fairport teacher and be clustered with Fairport kids. It just depends on the magnitude and the variables in each circumstance. We'll be pairing them with an educator. It could be a Fairport educator. It could be someone from a neighboring school district as well. But this would be their home district.
Can you talk about mask breaks, and if students are in the room and they're at their desks, are they able to take the masks off?
So I just want to back up because I know that there was an echo, and it'd be worth just continuing to talk about the virtual really quickly. You know, if there's a choice to do number 3, parents would be a big part of that. They would have to dedicate time to make sure that things are being coordinated at home. I just want to be very clear. Since it is a BOCES platform, since it is a new program, initially it might start out very slowly as we transition and as they get some rhythm and cadence to their new online environment. Your next question, please, was regarding masking breaks. Within this policy that we have to follow, we will be intentionally putting or developing masking breaks. Students will be appropriately spaced. Even if they're outside, yes, we're still playing outside. The board definitely has expectations that that we give students that break throughout the day, particularly with our K-5 students. There will be opportunities when we're using larger spaces. So we're in a room 512 here at the high school, and you put 12, 14 kids in here, you could space kids out, and you can take a masking break. But if you're in a classroom environment and you're spaced appropriately, you don the mask and be ready to put it back on. But you'll be socially distanced, 6 feet, as per the guidance. And if for some reason that distance becomes compromised, you'll be ready to don the mask. If you want to speak to that, Dr. Cook?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's really important that we have to, we're not going to eliminate risk. We're doing as much as we can to reduce risk as much as possible. So every step you can take to do that is going to be critical. Distancing, density are two of the biggest factors that we know impact this. We know masking is beneficial to those wearing them as well as to others. There's more studies and evidence coming out that shows that. Sanitizing, taking those steps are going to be really important. So the important thing that Brett has highlighted, and I've seen even in the guidance, is there's always a potential for change. If testing strategies evolve and there's different ways to do tests, are we able to have people return to work sooner? Kids return to school sooner if there's a case. If there is more knowledge on filtration systems or something that allows us to feel more comfortable in indoor settings versus outdoor. Those are things that being prepared to adjust because things will change. Whatever is in the guidance right now from state ed and from DOH, things will change. There's constant updates and we're learning new things about this virus, and even within kids, and Brett has made this point, but I think it's perhaps it's worth repeating from the standpoint that not all kids are the same. What we would try to do in elementary age kids is different because biologically they interact differently with the virus than middle school and high school kids. So by no means is there a one-size-fits-all approach here. We just appreciate the opportunity to try to provide schools with some local, consistent type of strategies. Also knowing what are our assets in our community. Developmental pediatricians who have a lot of experience working with kids with special needs. A number of pediatricians who work with very medically complex kids. Our group, where I work at the hospital, we work with a lot of families whose children are Mary Cariola, and what strategies we can help with those families. So we, as a community, have a lot of resources in our pediatric community, our primary care doctors, and how we can take advantage of that. Telemedicine was a big pivot in this community. Can we help schools by increasing that access into the schools to make, when a case arises, and a case will arise, the response to that quicker? So I'll leave that for you.
What frequently comes to the forefront is if there is a COVID detection, somebody tests positive, whether it's a student or staff member, what is our protocol? And I know that we've been talking a lot about that for the past several weeks, and I know that protocols are being developed, but do you want to speak to that, please, Dr. Cook?
Sure. I mean, so the protocols are kind of, I don't want to say constantly evolving, but they need to take into consideration the setting, the exposure, the duration exposure, the close nature. So that's why podding kids or cohorting kids, you have one case in a class and these kids are in a cohort of 12, then it's those 12 kids who are potentially exposed and that teacher who are potential exposures. But if you have those kids then intermixing in the cafeteria, in 4 other classes, and a special, now your potential exposure range goes from 12 to 40, 50, and now you're talking about an exposure that then you have to then isolate. And many of those kids will have siblings. So if it's a household contact, now you're talking more. So, the key steps that we're taking, all of them are important, but the concept of the cohorting is really helpful. If you have one room out in a school, that's a lot better to keep the school running, keep everything else running, as opposed to half the school. So, the county, we actually have really good, talking to colleagues of mine in Albany. I had a friend, it took her 10 days to get her result from Albany, in a suburb of Albany. We're getting turnarounds of 1 to 2 days, some quicker. They are looking at new, newer types of tests, less invasive tests, better options for that. There is technology that's being developed for, rapid point of care tests, like the rapid strep test you get in your doctor's office. Similar type of tools. There is a dual flu and COVID test that's being developed. So when flu season starts hitting, we can, a kid has a fever, that's a symptom for both. One swab to try to get them both. So that is, again, another evolving science and area that hopefully we will get better, better information that will allow more flexibility.
But I think the main point, from my perspective, even as a parent, is that we have a partner in Monroe County Department of Health. There's a process, and there's just not going to be one person sitting in a room making a decision.
No, I'm sorry, you're absolutely right. The Monroe County Department of Health has a very robust contact tracing approach, and you apply it the same way. If a person turns up positive at work, they go and investigate it down. That's where we hear these stories of clusters at, meat packing plants. The 50 people were in a room and they're only working 3 feet apart and they're in there for 4 hours, even though they had masks. That amount of time and density, that's considered an exposure. So the county has those same steps. And again, contact tracing, like a lot of the work we're doing here as a community, is a social contract. It's not just, oh, my kid has to stay home. It's stay home, and if you're instructed to isolate, it's isolate. It's not, oh, well, my kid, his class was exposed. If the family members are told to isolate, they can't leave either. There's very specific instructions. The county and the community is available to help families with that. But, it's when that doesn't get followed that everything falls apart. Then there's almost no point in having these steps. So you're right. This is being done, actually in the community, it's already being done in a variety of work sites. So this, in a sense, becomes another work site that they're going to be able to respond to.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the clarification.
Sorry.
If you take a look at the hybrid model, it decreases the density. It brings students to school 4 out of 5 days. On that off day, there'll be the expectation that students and teachers interact, whether it be digitally, through office hours. Students will have some guided practice where they can check in with the teacher. So it's not a day off. It's just a day for us to deep clean. It's a day for to have our teachers plan and get organized for the coming week. And it's an opportunity for students to do their assignments in multiple different modalities. And that's what that time frame between August 3rd and the 21st will give us the chance to iron out those details. To my right, again, I have a number of leaders in the district, from principals to our Director of Student Services and our B&G appreciate their interest in this conversation, and I know that they're feverishly taking notes and with high hopes and expectations of bringing students in and help leading and framing the work as we bring in our staff to this conversation over the next several weeks. So thank you for being here. I know that they would love to jump in and take the mic and share their passions around this conversation too. But when we're asking about what are we doing with childcare? Can we take special requests? I know that those are questions that are on their mind, and as we move through this process, we will be able to answer those questions moving forward. And I just feel like I need to continue to emphasize, when you see this questionnaire, we need you to take this questionnaire and fill it out regarding transportation. Again, transportation is about social distancing, 6 feet apart, and masking. We will not be able to put our buses to full capacity. We do know that families have said that they will take their children to school. They'll let them walk if they're within an acceptable, safe walking distance as well. And we just need to understand what that looks like. The same thing for the virtual option number 3, again, so we can plan accordingly.
I want to make sure Kelly has time to get to her questions. To people watching, I'm only about halfway through, so if you didn't hear your question tonight, please come back tomorrow. And I think this applies to all grade levels. Who will be providing the COVID tests if there's concern that a staff member or student with their symptoms has this? Did that come out right? So if someone is exhibiting symptoms of COVID, who's providing the testing and at what cost?
So that's going to follow kind of however the healthcare practice would roll out. I think, and I don't know that the schools have the full answer for it, they need to isolate the student, contact the primary care provider, see what can be done. Can they be seen in the office? Do they need to go to urgent care? Could they be sent to the MCC site for the county? So there are options, and again, our community has a lot of options. I think we have the potential as a community to even speed that up even more because of telemedicine and some of those strategies. How the testing will then work for the child is going to be just like if they were sick. So it'll go through insurance. That's not an employer requirement. That's where there's a lot more nuance to it. When they were requiring nursing home staff to be tested twice a week, that wasn't a symptom-based, disease-based treatment, so there was big arguments of, does the employer pay for it, does the state pay for it? If a person is sick, then it goes to that default. If there's then contact tracing, there's additional testing, the county organizes that. I don't know if it's covered through the county or through insurance. I can't answer that. But that's, it's a very good question. The real key being the protocol to isolate, contain, next steps, and where to go next.
So just to clarify, COVID testing will not happen in the school buildings. They will need to go.
I don't know of that. I've not heard that as a model. I think theoretically anything's possible, but I've not heard that. You're talking about training additional staff to do it, but nurses can do it. I mean, a lot of nurses do the equivalent of it. I don't want to pass that responsibility on other people here, though. But, I mean, that's a great potential. Could you test a kid right at school as a first step? But, again, that's not specified.
Yeah.
I'll write that policy for Brett. Sorry.
Exactly, and I don't mean to interrupt you or jump in on that. That would be, part of our reentry plan. We have to detail what our process is if and when somebody comes down. And we would rely on our medical experts, and we have great relationships with our pediatricians, and I know that this will be a priority, but I don't anticipate us doing COVID testing in our schools.
Right, and I'll add that, I mean, this is a pediatric community that actually is very, very well connected, and I can't repeat that enough. I worked in Buffalo, I work in Albany. The pediatrics and primary care providers around kids in this community work very well together. They're more than willing to work with schools on strategy like that. We have very robust experience with telemedicine. I was kind of talking about this the other night, but we had faculty that developed a telemedicine program in this community in 2002. And we're doing acute visits with kids in daycare and schools in the city. So we have a lot of experience. And that may be something that we can do locally that a lot of other communities in the state can't. So potential of some type of rapid type of testing like that? Is there a team that could go out right to the school, pick up the kid, bring them home, swap them on the way in or something? I mean, that's kind of.
So as we go through this process and everybody
Right,
becomes.
and that's where we're gonna be communicating a lot with Brett and the other schools.
I would have to say that our Director of Student Services is here, and I know that she would, probably echo and is committed to a very detailed process that involves our medical director and our professionals and our school nurse facilitator. I don't know if you wanted to speak to that. Are you comfortable? Do you want to get a microphone? This is Deborah Miles, our Director of Student Services.
Yes, we haven't gotten into specifics about school sites and school districts doing testing. I mean, we would be open to whatever the county recommended, but at this point, we haven't developed significant plans like that. Our nurses are certainly establishing how they're going to operate their offices, how they're going to separate a student that presents with symptoms, and certainly our probably first, response would be the sooner we get a parent to pick them up and remove them from the school population and community, the better off we are. So if we know those testing sites are out there that can get these test results quicker, then that's going to be, the protocol that we would certainly be looking to provide. So making sure we're keeping, we are walking around and we're viewing our nurses' offices and we're talking with our school nurses and our administrators about, separating out students that are down there for routine visits and medications and different things like that, and then students that come down with symptoms and where we're going to be treating them and sort of quarantining them, if you will, until we know further, what we're dealing with. So those would be our practices that we're putting in place.
Thank you, Deb Miles. I would also say that as a district, since July 1st, as we brought our staff back, daily as staff logs into their computer, they have to take a health screening, which, we have a centralized area where this information is processed. And if there is somebody who says yes to any one of the questions, it gives us an opportunity to connect and make sure that everybody's healthy and everybody's following the right guidance as we transition back.
Last question, will face shields be allowed? I know that there's new studies coming out about their effectiveness. Is that something that students would be allowed to wear in place of a mask?
So I'll let Dr. Cook speak about the science of the masking and the shielding, and I can then speak to what our expectations will be.
So a really important question is also in the balance of where we are with current guidelines. So as we've learned more about this virus, we've adjusted. Right now, there's not nearly enough evidence to suggest that a face shield alone on someone is as protective. So it really does become a risk benefit option. So masking provides more, shielding a little bit less. But it's really a matter of trying to be as consistent as possible. Working with students on that is really important. Again, our special ed community, developmental disabilities community in our area have done wonderful work with kids and getting into the routine and habit of using masks and wearing masks. And kids with sensory and texture issues, with time and work, consistently do fine with it. So I think there's potentially options. I know our children who are very medically complex also represent a much different approach. And again, we are looking at specific strategies for them as well. So masks may be included. At the same point, teachers being allowed to wear a mask as well as a face shield. Because if you're an elementary school teacher and you're reading, you may want to pull down your mask and show them how you're pronouncing words. And being at a further distance allows that. The shield provides just an added barrier. Again, we're not going to wipe out risk. It's trying to take whatever steps we can to reduce it. So using spacing, distancing, and other types of barriers are important. But while information may be coming out, it's not nearly enough that I've seen any national organizations come out and say we can make that switch yet.
Deb, do you want to speak a little bit about?
Certainly I'm not going to trump our pediatrician here, right? I would fully agree with you. And I know that as a district, we're ordering different models. We're looking at lots of different types of masks to see which ones are going to be the most protective for our teachers, our staff, and our students. We are considering ordering them for everybody, but again, wearing the mask and the shield is going to offer us the best mitigation for risk. There are certain situations, obviously in an educational setting, where a speech therapist is working with a student and you need to be able to see your mouth, right? How you're producing the sounds. So, we're having to take a look at that and how we can, work in larger offices and larger spaces, further apart, and maybe being able to use a face shield without a mask to accomplish that task. We're also looking at our delivery of services, and, a lot of those pronunciation types of services can be done in really short bursts, just real quick 10-minute repetitive things, and then, practice the skill back in the classroom. So that eliminates the amount of time two people are spending together too, if they're in a shield situation.
I would offer is that, so absolutely, there's the generic approach to this, and then there's where we need appropriate accommodations. And obviously speech pathology, children learning to read, extremely important. Could kids who need additional speech therapy do that live Zoom with their speech therapist? Talk about distancing, you got it right there. But right, you have shielding, you have lots of options, and we're getting really creative here with doing it. So we're not going to be absolute. There's people who have made clear masks. I don't know how well they fit. I want to try to get one to see what it's like, but that would be perfect. Rochester has a very large deaf community, and they were one of the first communities that created clear masks because of so many people who sign and lip read. Because, this doesn't work with the lip reading, as we know. So
We also know that PPE is hard to get
not
at.
easy to get.
They're not easy to get. I would ask that you take a quick moment and talk about the social contract. There's a question out there that speaks to, are we going to be testing kids or asking kids to complete a questionnaire as they come to school each day on how they're feeling? I'm going to, just throw it out to you, but the social contract is, we would hope that we would partner with parents, and parents, we would be responsive to checking in with their kids daily, and if they are showing the symptoms, and we'll be communicating what those symptoms are, if you haven't heard them already, to keep your child home, and to keep everybody safe. And it's not like in the past where you might have shoved them on out the door if they had a little sniffle. But the social contract is an important piece. I know that you've been speaking to me about, Dr. Cook.
Yeah, it's really important, and this is more than just parents and their kids. We have to look and we have to push our employers. Parents are going to need more flexibility with this. How do you ask kids symptoms? Obviously, that's not great, but a fever that's a really good one. And the symptoms are changing. The symptoms we looked for at the beginning of this pandemic were flu-like symptoms. Now we see there's a lot more. There's rash potential, there's GI type of symptoms, so there's other things that we have to look at. And that will probably change as well. So being consistent with doing that, setting it up, how schools will have to look at doing that is obviously going to be varying by size. But it is really important that, we're all in this together. We're all trying to get back to wherever it is we can. And public health and these strategies are not a barrier to that. They're the pathway to get there. These are the steps that will get us there sooner. It's allowing us to open up our economy more in gradual steps. It's allowing us to get back to work, allowing us to get back more of our activities and stuff. So everyone participating in this is what's going to make this go, because the more weakness in the chain, the more breaks you're going to have, and we're going to get behind.
Other questions?
Yeah, can I ask a couple of quick questions? Just on I guess they're general questions. It's not on? It should be on. Yeah. And it's just a couple of questions, I guess, that would more pertain to the 612 community. I know the doctor talked about cohorting classrooms, but is there any insight as to what the 612 classrooms would look like as of right now?
That's a great question. K-5, it becomes an easier conversation. As you move up the grade levels, it becomes more challenging. We're going to be working diligently to try to cohort and slow things down as much as we can in the 6-8 world. But as you go 9-12, there's multiple different electives. It becomes interest-based. And that's where it becomes challenging. We have 10th graders sharing classes with 11th graders, and so on. So it becomes more challenging, and that's why the distancing piece, the masking piece, taking the density out of the building, looking at our hallway traffic and how we coordinate that, that becomes even more important.
And then there's another question about, just kind of switch gears, transportation. I know you're asking parents to, decide what they want to do. Is there an option for a one-way option? Like that it's only a drop-off or it's only a pickup, if that's possible, or does it have to be all in?
That's a really good question. A part of me wants to be able to say, you know what, we're going to try to be flexible, and if that's the case, but there's another part of me that says the less variables, the more consistent we can make it, and the more firm we could be with our planning. So, I think that needs to be determined, but that's an excellent question.
No.
I'm sorry I don't have a pat answer. There's a part of me that says, sure, we will be flexible, but then there's a practical side to me that says we need to know, to what extent. And if it is a split, that tells us information too. It really does. So that's helpful information.
Okay. A couple other just quick ones. As far as, I know you just touched on the electives, is it still going to be a possibility for the kids in those upper grades?
100%. Yeah, and I speak to August 3rd through the 21st. I speak to getting our staff involved. I know that there's been conversations with our teacher leaders. I know that we've seen our teachers in. We are looking at multiple different ways to do things differently. Now, what does that mean for bands, right? What does that mean for choirs when you have to be 12 feet apart? It might mean looking at it differently. It might mean doing things virtually. It might mean doing things after school in outside settings under the right circumstances. So we're looking at doing things differently. If there are courses that we could do virtually, and it helps with the density in the building, that could be an option too. But as we move forward, that will come to fruition. I do know that recently the high school, reached out to seniors to take a look at the amount of courses that they take their senior year, again, with the hopes and effort of decreasing density without impacting their graduation status. So I know that request was out there, and I know that the FHS team is working on that, to help answer some of those questions.
Another one was, what a day would kind of look like. Would it be like it was, a typical day, pre-COVID, where, they changed classrooms, they did, they moved around the building, bell schedules, things like that. I know it's something that obviously is a work in progress, but is that the hope, I guess?
Again, you're doing it with less density, right? And you're using spaces that you might have not used in the past. Your cafeterias, your LGIs, your art rooms, your choir band rooms, they might be seen as classrooms as well. Cafeterias, if I said that, I apologize, but it's just looking at spaces differently, transitioning students. If you're at the middle school, putting kids on different bell schedules, so the halls, again, decreasing the density at half the capacity. It's a little bit slowed down. It's not using your lockers, or if there are lockers used, it's under unique circumstances. You won't see kids, on top of each other, one locker at a time. So those are the pieces that, again, August 3rd through the 18th, we'll be ironing, the 21st, we'll be ironing those details out.
Okay, and then just on the special ed portion, kids with IEPs and 504s, how will that kind of be handled? I know you touched on it a little bit, but I guess at the upper levels, how are you going to handle that with kids, especially like with RTI services and things like that?
So there's a lot there. There's special ed, there's response to intervention, making sure that we're putting staff in positions to support our students. How are we meeting in a resource room? Is that done digitally at different times? Again, our most restrictive classroom environments where there are self-contained environments, we plan on having them in our schools. If there's special classes, where they are, pushing into an English classroom, but they're getting math in a self-contained environment. We're still working on those details, and we will be communicating the parameters around that. That has special education implications that Dennis DeRosers, our Director of Special Education, and Pam Serrani, who is our new Director of Special Programming, they're working with legal, they'll be collaborating with parents, most importantly, and other districts to understand how they're navigating that terrain. But it will definitely take a lot of coordinated efforts.
And what about support services for non-special ed kids? Typical kids who have just 504s or IEPs that get literacy lab or math lab, kind of same thing?
It might be done differently. It might be done, with the 504, again, it's a legal document that we're honored to serve, and we happily do so. So, that's about modifications and modifying the environment, so that shouldn't change. But if a student is struggling with executive functioning skills or reading or numeracy skills, looking at different ways to service them in the classroom, that we will not be having kids going off to little pods or areas simply because, that just breaks up the clusters and that gets, kids in different places. So we'll be looking at, how do we manage our staff from that realm.
Okay.
But again, we're honored and we happily serve those children, and we want to do all we can to give them the best possible experience. So we just have to do it differently.
Just two more questions that I had real quick. Maybe not quick, but there's a group of people who are very anti-mask. How would that be handled, I guess, in a school setting? Is it an option? I would assume it's not an option, but you can probably speak to that.
Yeah, that's a challenging conversation. To me, this is a public health conversation. To me, this is about, do you believe in a pandemic or not? The state has given us clear guidance. We'll be reinforcing that guidance and that expectation. This is about everybody's health. It's not necessarily about just my health. It's also about our staff members who have health needs. We have older staff members who are interacting with kids. We need to respect, their health interests as well. So, I guess that's part of the social contract. That's part of the communication, and that's part of the family's choice. And that's why there is choice. Deb Miles would like to say something.
Yeah, the only other piece I'd like to add about, there's a lot in the comment section about wearing masks and why are we wearing masks when the regs might say something differently. I think the other piece, and Dr. Cook certainly cut me off and take over, but I think the other piece that we need to be cognizant about is kids all coming back together after being away for 6 and 7 months are going to come with very different germs not related to COVID. But our school nurses aren't going to be able to differentiate those symptoms. So to prevent your child from having to be their education interrupted and sent home for 5 to 10 days waiting for, the test to come back and so forth, wearing masks is going to prevent the strep throat and the common cold and all of those things that are going to look and feel like COVID initially, and then sending kids in and out of the schools getting tested. So for your own convenience and really less anxiety on your child, wearing the mask and preventing all of that from happening is obviously just a precaution that I think would serve to benefit everybody.
Thank you.
Just one more about, just in regards to mental health, kids being nervous about coming back, parents being nervous about coming back, kids being in a situation that they haven't been in some time, how are services going to change, if they're going to change, how will those needs be addressed?
So I think, this is an area that I'm very proud of, actually, in looking at the 45-page document. When you go down through and you look at the social emotional expectations for what schools need to do, Fairport has hit the mark already with a lot of this programming. We have a very robust mental health program in our schools. We have school psychologists, school social workers, school counselors. We have behavior specialists. We have our clinic, our Office of Mental Health Clinic with the University of Rochester Medical Center. So I feel very confident that we're going to be able to meet the needs of our students. We have lots of different social emotional programming that we will continue to offer, that we've started training our staff on. We're certainly looking at a different startup to the school year. I think Brett would agree, we're not going to run into the classrooms and hit the ground running with assessments and, a lot of intense academics right away. We have to get this, get a sense of how our kids are feeling and thinking about being back in school, especially if we have all of these, barriers in between, the work that we're doing with the masks and shields and so forth. So, and also being in smaller groups, and your friend might not be in school on the day that you're in school. So really having to navigate some of those things for kids. But I feel like we're well prepared for that. We will offer, the same level of support our staff are going to need at times too. So I feel like we will offer the professional development our staff need to have some of the refresher courses and things, like our youth mental health first aid, our therapeutic behavior management, restorative practices. This just really creates, this whole scenario creates the environment for restorative practices. It's all about building relationships with kids and understanding everybody's stories. And, we've all been in a different place as we've been out on this closure. So as our kids come back together and we, get to learn who they are and spend enough time making sure that we do that and that they're comfortable in school, so that they are ready to learn. That's certainly going to be our number one goal. But we will also individually address the needs of, students if they need something more, specific and one-to-one, our school counselors and social workers will be certainly ready to take care of them.
Thank you. Mr. Schliz, would you like to have some closing comments? And then,
One thing that hasn't been addressed that I know is being worked on is the food program, that there will be students who are eligible for the meals every day, and those students who are not in school on those days, there will be programs set up where they can still get those meals that they're legally required to get. So there are a lot of small parts to this that are constantly being analyzed, being manipulated, and again, that could all change on a dime depending on what 8 o'clock tonight brings, because we don't. That's basically how we're operating. I just want to say thank you for all the work that's gone into this collaboration. It's not just within our district; it's within the whole county. I know, Brett, you are constantly in contact with the superintendents, with Dr. Mendoza and the health department. Our administrators are always looking at different scenarios, thinking, what if we try this? What if we try this? This is a great opportunity to try new things and a new way of educating children. The old way of chalk and chalkboards that I used to use isn't going to work this time. So, thank you.
thank you, Mr. Schliz. Mrs. Kostick, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Well, I just echo what Tim said. Very grateful to all the work. This is a heavy lift for everybody. And none of us is happy with this. It's not anything we ever would have wanted to do other than with extreme circumstances. And a pandemic is certainly extreme. So we have to just weigh risk and benefits and do the best we can to keep our students and our staff safe. And that's what we'll continue to look at, as well as the guidance and the mandates that we receive. So I appreciate all this hard work, and those were some great questions, keeping us on our toes and keep us thinking. So I appreciate that as well.
Thank you, Ms. Kostick. Dr. Cook, do you have any closing thoughts?
I just want to thank the community and everyone really being open to the ideas that we have to think outside the box and look at things differently. History can teach us lots of lessons, and I actually was able to find something, if I can share it. This is something a friend gave to me years ago when she was cleaning out her father's house when her father had passed away. And I'll share my screen as soon as I can make this a little larger. This was from the Rochester City School District for her father. And I can't get this to open properly here. We'll try that. And let's see if I can share from here. It's going to let me share? No, it's not. You know, never let good deed go unpunished here, right? Can you help me there quick, Tony? Let me do it from here then. I'll just share from this. This is perfect. All right. Sorry. I know, it's not nearly worth the... The suspense is killing you. It's killing me too. So this was from, she found in her father's things when she was going through them, from the Rochester City School District. On the front, Department of Public Health, or Department of Health Education, Rochester City School District, card white, all right. I don't know if you can tell at the top there, it's kind of difficult to see, but it actually says May 1927. It had his name, obviously redacted for HIPAA compliance here, has his height, his weight, actual weight, average weight for height, and he was actually considered 4 pounds underweight. On the back, or on the front, it says all right means you're in the all right zone, and follow the rules of the health game as found on the reverse side. So 1927, they want us to do things like sleep 10 hours every night with the windows open. Brush your teeth before going to bed, before coming to school. Eat regularly 3 times a day, chewing slowly. Eat fruit and vegetables other than potato each day. Drink 2 glasses of milk, 4 glasses of water each day. Never drink tea or coffee. I don't follow that rule. Have a bowel movement at the same time every day. That will definitely present a challenge with all the classrooms. But entering vigorously into the daily morning health inspection, daily schoolroom setup drills, games hygiene, gymnasium work, and take at least 1 complete bath every week. Well, we know we want hand washing very frequently, so maybe we don't follow that. But this does reflect the fact that there are some things that are really true. Sleeping with the windows open, getting fresh air. This is really important things from history. So it may not have been nearly as effective as I hoped presenting that slide, but we can learn from history. We can see what went wrong in the past and where we can make those changes. There you go. And so we hope that on top of the tremendous amount of current information that's coming out, like I've seen with Fairport and a number of schools getting ready to pivot, because things will change. We will need to adjust. And kids are extremely resilient. It's us who maybe as adults that don't change direction as well. So I'll leave it at that. My slide did not go nearly as well as I hoped. Sorry.
I would also want to say, be humble and kind, after all that, so, the Tim McGraw in me. Deb Miles, some thoughts to share?
No, I guess I would just, if you have, concerns about social emotional, certainly feel free to reach out to my email, dmiles@fairport.org. I'm happy to answer your questions or concerns. But again, I will just reiterate that I feel like we're in a really good place. Our teachers are great at what they do, and not just instruction. They care for our students, so I think everybody will be in a good place.
Thank you, and I know that our teachers are raring to get at this and to really, put their excellence and their deep commitment to our children on this plan too. So that's forthcoming. Mr. Smith, do you have any thoughts from your perspective?
The only thought, just work. Here we go. The only thoughts I have is, again, from a physical plant perspective, the efforts that have been put forth from the Fairport community are extremely beneficial now. In many ways, other than the fact that we wish our buildings were twice the size so we could spread out. It's a very doable task. Again, we stay up on our building management systems. We have digital controls. We have the modern filtration systems. We're using green and EPA certified chemicals. All tools in the toolbox that make the facilities team's job manageable.
And all tools that will be articulated in our plan, our comprehensive plan that will need to be on our website. And this plan will be submitted July 31st, and will continue to be developed as we move along. But again, the community will have access to this. It will be prominently placed on our website. Kelly Hodge.
I would just say that, I know we had some issues in the beginning, and I will, keep looking through the comments and bringing forth more questions that you have. And if you do have any questions that weren't answered by any of the information that was given today or any of the information shared on the slides, please feel free to email Sarah or myself still, and, we can try and bring those forward for you. And, thank you for your input.
Thank you. Sarah Driscoll.
I'm just grateful for the opportunity, Brett, to put you on the hot seat. And I appreciate you being transparent and answering our questions to the best of your ability. And like Kelly said, if you have questions that you don't think were answered, or you want clarification on, you can send those to your PTA president, and they will get those to Kelly and I, and we will be back tomorrow night.
Yes, we will be back tomorrow night from 6:30 to 8, using the same format, using the same presentation. I really appreciate everybody's efforts. I'm grateful for our Board of Education and their high expectations that we come back strong, that we think creatively, and we look at every single option and we leave no stone unturned. I really appreciate their level of oversight. I'm grateful for our administrative team who is always ready, on demand, and ready to contribute and say, how can we do the best for our children? I know that our staff has the same level of energy and commitment. I know that they can't wait to get in the game and start making contributions and putting their very important essence into our work. Our technology team, thank you very much for working through the glitches. I know that we'll continue to get better as we move forward. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody here tomorrow night. Again, we will be stronger. We will work through this together. See you tomorrow night.